Hi guys, hope everybody's safe and well, and we are going to talk a little bit more about chords and the concepts with chords presented in chapters 6, 5, 6, and 7. And again, getting going, playing chords on the guitar, and we were starting to discuss when we last met, practicing some of the chord progressions on page 39. A chord progression is basically a technical way of saying practicing chords in a series, one chord after the next. And we pointed out that oftentimes guitar players, they practice playing chords with a mistake by stopping, by pausing in between the chords. So one of the first things we have to understand is we need to know these chord shapes. They need to be memorized. I need to be able to get to them on the fretboard, and my fingers need to know where they're going. So, you don't have to memorize all 15 chords right off the bat. If you start with a couple of chords that you like or are easy to play and you keep adding to that, that's a good practice. This is one of the reasons I like the chord progressions on page 39, because they work with the E, A, and D chords, which are some of the easier shapes to play on that list of 15 chords. So for example, the first chord progression on page 39, this is the way it's written in the book there. It's just basically pictures of the chords. There's no time signature. There's no strumming pattern. We said the first thing to do here is to just basically learn the chord shapes that are there and be able to play them. E minor, A7, D, A7, and E minor. So I really need to be able to do that without rhythm, just going from chord to chord and not struggling with each chord. So again, if there's a chord I'm not comfortable with, I've got to practice it physically until I start to get into that comfort zone. So once again, E minor, I'm using 2 and 3 to play that chord. A7, not a big change. And for D, I'm going to move my index and second finger into the second fret and back to A7 and E minor. Again, trying to play the correct bass note. So when you go to practice this chord progression after learning and getting comfortable with those chords, or any chord progression that you're working on, you've got to start to incorporate rhythm and not stop or hesitate between the chords. So the way we talked about doing this in class was to do whole notes and count 4 beats for each chord, strum on beat 1, let it ring for 4 beats, but then leave the old chord or the chord you're on early to get to the new chord on time. So in this chord progression, I would play E minor, 2, 3, 4. Get to A7, 2, 3. I leave that chord, and 1, 2, 3. Back to A7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2. I'll do it once more. 3, 4. 1, 2, leaving the old chord early to get to A7, 2, 3, leaving that chord early to get to D7, D, 2, 3, back to A7, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. So there's no pausing. I'm actually getting off the old chord so I can make sure I'm playing that chord right on the downbeat, the next chord, the new chord. So then you can break it into half notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Each chord's getting 2 beats. 2, 3, 4. 4, 1, and it's giving me a little less time to get from each chord to the next chord. I only have 2 beats to get to the new chord instead of 4 beats, playing those half notes. And then the final step before doing any kind of more complicated strumming would be playing quarter notes. 1, 2, now I have only 1 beat to get to the next chord. So when you move to quarter notes, it's okay to slow the tempo way down so it kind of resembles the whole note practice you were doing. So it's okay to do something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I have a long beat and a lot of time to change. And 1. 4th string in the bass there, I missed it. 3, 4, and A in the bass there. So I played 1 chord per beat with 4 beats in a measure is the concept there. Even though it's not written on the page here, there's no time signature, there's no measure lines. I was just making up my own rhythm of 4 beats per measure and trying to stay in rhythm without pausing between the chords. So there's several progressions there. That first page, page 39, I highly recommend working on that. Exercises 1, 2, and 3. And when you go over to page 40, you start to get more complicated chords involved there. B7, G, C. I think I pointed out maybe progression 5 to practice early on. And then there was a couple other ones I may have suggested. Number 8, which is G, E minor, and C, and number 9, which is C, A minor, and D7. Doing that same kind of thing, and she suggests some fingerings there that allow for common fingers between the chords. But I'd like to cover a couple other things in this video as well. So I'm going over to chapter 6, and this is where the song accompaniment is starting to be introduced here. And she says the title here is Song Accompaniment in Charts, Songs with 1 Chord. Well, in the musical world, we don't really use 1 chord for a whole song very often. It does happen, but not very often. But there's a concept she's introducing here, and the concept is there are 2 layers in music. And this is a generalization again, but it's very true through pop music and other idioms, other styles of music as well. And that is there is an accompaniment or a supporting part, which are the chords, and then there is a main part, which is the melody. We can say the singer usually has the melody, so you can hum the melody. It's 1 note at a time. Your first test that you played in Guitar 1 was a melody and not chords. So by doing examples that are on page 42, she's basically just trying to illustrate a point here, I think. It's not too deep musically here, but for example, excuse me if I have a G chord, she's saying if you pick a chord, and that chord is also the starting note of the melody. That's my middle G there. Gently down the stream, merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So it's more to illustrate the point that I'm singing over the top. That's the main line, and then the chords are the support underneath. It's sort of the foundation, and there's a single line going along the top there. So this is introducing chapter 6, this concept of chords and melody. And it even says on the very next page, page 43 here, think in 2 layers, playing and singing. I'm not crazy about the vocabulary there because we can play chords and we can play a melody. So playing, she means, or is referring to the strumming. That's your chords. Playing chords and singing the melody. So those are our two sort of conceptual ways we're being introduced to this. Playing and singing. Playing the chords, singing the melody. And the technical terms that are a little bit more, I think, useful here are harmony, which the notes that harmonize with each other are chords, and melody. Harmony and melody. And then there are a few examples of that. Harmony, it reads the chord sounds blend with the melody. So the harmony is actually taken from the scale. That's why when you use a scale to play a melody or sing a melody, it works with the chords. They're from the same group or same key. And then rhythmic pulse. The guitar plays at the same tempo or speed as the singing. So we're talking about both counting the same number of beats and keeping a steady tempo while we're doing that. And there is another concept that's introduced in this chapter, which is on page 44, which is an important one for us guitar players, and that is, what is a simple chord chart? Because when we're practicing a song or learning a song, whether it's a cover or writing a song, and we're working with other musicians, a simple chord chart can be very effective. So what we need are three elements when we write a simple chord chart. We need a time signature, how many beats are in a group or a measure. We need to know what chord to play. And we need our measure lines to show us how long that chord lasts for. So when we break a song down into those three elements, they look like this. We've got a time signature. Oops, I'm pointing to the wrong side there. We've got a time signature. We've got a chord name, and then the measure lines tell us how long that chord actually lasts. So E minor gets 3 strums, 1 per beat. A minor, 3 strums. E minor, 3 strums, and then 3 more strums before the double bar. So the measure lines are really important as well because they tell us how long a chord lasts for. And these simple chord charts are very important, as we said, for if you're working with other musicians, because bass players can read the chord charts. They can read the root of the chord. That's usually what they're playing. And keyboard players who know their chords, like guitar players, can look at a simple chord chart and read them. So there's one more thing I wanted to introduce here. I'm trying to keep the video short. And that is on page 45, there's a very important list of chord progressions here, or simple chord charts. Number one here is very easy, and it's E minor, A minor, E minor. When you're doing your final exam and you're a beginning chord player, this could be a great example to do when I give you the option to play your own chord progression. You would play 8 E minors, 8 A minors, and 8 E minors, and that would be a simple chord chart being read and played for your final. The other thing to point out here is that the folia is on page 45 as well. That's number 4, and the folia is an example that you would have to play 3 beats per measure all the way through twice, once with a quarter note rhythm and once with your own rhythm that you could play and do a variation of. You have to stay in 3/4 time, but you could finger pick and you could do alternating bass, a couple concepts we're going to talk about down the road. But this, in this case now, this is an important page to point out. Simple chord progressions in simple chord charts, or written in simple chord chart fashion. And number 1, you could practice any of these, of course, or play any of these, but number 1 is a Probably one of the easiest chord progressions I could point out: E minor, A minor, E minor. And then the folia is probably one of the more, I wouldn't say difficult, but involved chord progressions that you could play for your final. And that is number 4 on this list: A minor, E minor, A minor, G, C, G, A minor, E, A minor. So you have to be able to play that G, C, G progression in rhythm. So that is basically the end of chapter 6. I'm going to stop there. Again, try to keep the video short and easy to look at and brush up on and use as you're getting ready and learning, but also getting ready and preparing for the final down the road. Talk to you soon. Have a good day.